Welcome to the historically underutilized business, or the HUBZone certification overview. This is a NorCal PTAC webinar. My name is James Forrest. I am procurement specialist and program coordinator for NorCal PTAC, and we have our longest serving procurement specialist here, Lenny Bean, with PTAC as well. So we're very excited about this presentation. Been putting in lots of research to get the good up-to-date information on the HUBZone certification. I'm going to hand things over to Lenny. We're going to get a little poll started, but right now, actually, let me just get that poll started right now. Lenny, you got to make sure not to click the screen until I'm done with the. Okay, let me get the poll started here. Let me just launch poll number 1. So we're just wondering if you're located, if you've checked if you're located in a HUBZone eligible area. So hopefully most of you have, but don't be shy if you haven't yet. We can go over that as well. So NorCal PTAC, we are the Northern California Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Yeah, it's a long one. So NorCal PTAC is much pithier. This is our service area, which means that if you have a business that's primarily located in one of these green counties, then you're eligible for our services. It has to be an established for-profit business that's based out of the USA. And you're not in startup phase, you're not in, gathering capital, you're actually ready to go and start getting your stuff together to bid on contracts. We are a nonprofit service. We're funded by the DLA with the federal government, as well as the Governor's Office of California and some other local grant sources as well. And we provide all of our services for free. So you didn't pay anything for these webinars. You won't pay anything if you decide to join as a client. And those of you who have already joined as clients, we hope that you've been happy with our services. We work as hard as we can to offer good services to you for free. And so one thing I like to point out to potential clients and otherwise is that we are not a government agency. So we get referred over from the SAM, FSD, help desk, different organizations, but we are not a help desk branch of any government agency. We're a third party, and that actually can be quite beneficial. We can't put our thumb and advocate for you, but we do have a unique perspective on government contracting, and we can help navigate it as someone who has a third-party perspective. In 2021, in the methods you see here, counseling, bid matching, and resources and trainings, we actually helped our clients win more than $500 million. And that's probably underreported. And so for a relatively small service area, when we cover the Bay Area, that's quite a bit of money that's going into the pockets of mostly small businesses. And so that's really our passion, is to help folks overcome the barriers of getting into government contracting, so we can spread our tax dollars out when it actually comes from the government to pay for goods or services. So we offer counseling. You probably got that by now. One-on-one counseling. All our counseling right now is remote. We do it on Zoom, just like we're doing it today. It's in a Zoom meeting. We can go over just about any of the processes of selling your goods and services to the government. And when I say government, I could mean city, I could mean county, could be tribal, state, federal, municipal, even large utility organizations, semi-governmental organizations. So we help with just about anything related to government contracting. That includes certifications, doing market research, getting registered in SAM. That's a big one these days. Really proposal review, compliance, cradle to grave assistance, as long as it's related to government contracting and not grants or startup assistance or something else, then we can help with it. We can also set you up with a custom bid matching profile. This is pretty neat. Basically, it scrapes the internet for bid opportunities that match a list of criteria that you work out with your specialist. And then it sends you an email in your inbox every day with a list of opportunities that the program thinks you might want to see. So that's pretty neat. That's something that we pay for and then offer to you for free. And then we are also always putting on webinars and partnering with other organizations to put on webinars. So if you check out our website at norcalptac.org, the PTAC calendar button is going to have all of our upcoming webinars. And then under resources, past webinars, we have all the recordings, the slides, as well as a YouTube of every webinar that we've hosted since 2017. I think this is an amazing resource, so I like to look through that pretty regular if I need to brush up on a topic. These are always free to join for anyone. You don't have to be in California. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to register in any fancy way. Just name and email address. So thanks everyone for joining. If you're not in this service area, you could find your local PTAC down there, apptac-us.org. There are about 97 PTACs across the country. So if you're despairing right now that you're not in one of these green counties on the map in California, don't worry. You're probably in the jurisdiction of another PTAC. So with no further ado, I will hand things over to Lenny Bean. Like I said, Lenny Bean is our longest standing procurement specialist here. He's weathered the storm and he's ready to tell you everything he knows about the HUBZone certification. So thanks so much, Lenny, and go ahead and take it from here. And I'll ask you, let's see, ask to unmute, ask to start video.
Okay, welcome everyone. Again, I'm Lenny Bean. I'm with the NorCal PTAC, and I've been working with PTACs for about 10 years already. Doesn't seem possible, but here I am, and associated with the Northern California organization.
Just a quick note that looks like most people have checked if they're located in a HUBZone eligible area. Hopefully the answer was yes for most of them. A couple of you haven't, and that's a good idea. You can do that on the call. I'll drop the link in the chat. So once you click on the, you unshared the screen, so go ahead and reshare.
Okay, here we go. You see it okay, James?
No, I don't see it yet. Sorry for the technical difficulties, folks. Yeah, if you click on the green share screen button and then click desktop or screen 1. There we go. It says it's starting. Okay, now go to PowerPoint. Can you go to PowerPoint rather than the Chrome version?
Okay.
Bottom, yeah. All right. And Melissa, I see you're asking for the link. I'm definitely sending it. We're just troubleshooting right now. And then, yeah, go into screen share mode or slideshow mode.
Okay.
From current slide. Okay, we got.
Okay, I think we're good.
Yeah, we should be good.
Okay. Sorry for the inconvenience. Okay, so today we're going to talk about a HUBZone, and it's been around for quite a while. There are some rule changes. It's getting easier to apply for a HUBZone status with the federal government. So we'll go over some of that HUBZone eligibility criteria. We'll look at the HUBZone map. Again, this is all based on geographics of where the company is located and the number of employees to be at least 35% in a HUBZone. They don't have to reside in the same HUBZone as the corporation, but they do have to reside in the HUBZone, at least 35% of them. And we'll go over some examples of that as well. We'll also take a look at the certification application and some of the problems that we find with the certification. So what is HUBZone? HUBZone, and again, it's launched quite a while ago, 1999. So looking at distressed communities throughout the country where the federal government hasn't procured a lot of goods and services. And so they set this up to be able to give preferential access to some of the federal government contracts. Federal government, they have a goal of 3% of everything they buy to HUBZone certified small businesses. They do it by setting aside procurements just for HUBZone businesses, and they also have some price preference awards, which we'll talk about. Currently, they are only best they've ever done in HUBZone, I think it's like 2.4%. So there's a lot of focus on making it easier and simplify the application process to get more businesses HUBZone certified. Small businesses then become certified by they can locate in employer residents at least 35% from qualified hub zones. So what the focus is to increase employment opportunities in those underutilized business areas, stimulate some capital investment in those areas, and empower those communities by providing economic development to get the communities moving forward in federal contracting. And again, this is federal only we're talking right now. There is some state things that are coming down the pipe, which are pretty interesting. But at the moment, this is just a federal program. And it applies to all federal agencies that have one or more contracting officers. Does not apply to state and local government contracts. And similar programs are authorized under state and local, and you would have to look for those to see whether or not in your state or local law, whether they have a similar program. So the SBA regulates it and implements the program. They determine which businesses are eligible. They maintain a listing of qualified HUBZone firms to fulfill those procurement opportunities. And there's the link there for the dynamic small business search. This becomes one of the more important tools as you look for making sure your information is up to date as a small business, assuming you're registered in SAM, number one, so that they can find you. Number two, you can search for HUBZone businesses. It's a public database as well. Federal contracting officers, small business specialists, etc., use this extensively to search for businesses to see if they can set it aside for a HUBZone procurement only. The SBA also then adjudicates any protests of eligibility regarding HUBZone contracts. So 3% of all prime contract dollars are mandated for award. And as I said, they've only reached about 2.4%. So there's a big push. And if you look at the FY 2020, it was like 2.44% were awarded. They do it through contract set-asides and some sole source awards. Full and open competition. When they do full and open competition, it's a 10% price evaluation preference, which is applied for large businesses only. There's reserves for HUBZone SBCs under MACs, which are multiple award contracts, and orders are set aside for those HUBZones against a multiple award contract. So a multiple award contract would be a 10-year and a basic ordering agreement, if you will, and then they'll set aside within that basic ordering agreement orders to be set aside for HUBZone businesses only to bid on. So the rules and regs, of course, we have lots of those in federal contracting. So there's this FAR Part 19 lays it out, its applicability, the set-aside procedures, the contracting officers must go through, how they define sole source awards, any price evaluation preference, and limitations on subcontracting. It's contract clauses. The limitations on subcontracting, let me just briefly talk about that. So besides HUBZone, so the federal government will set aside a procurement for all small businesses, or they can do it just for HUBZone, or just for women-owned, just for veteran-owned, or for what's known as the 8A Minority Business Development Program. So for each one of those, so women-owned or like HUBZone we're talking about today, the limitation is that you as the HUBZone business, you receive an award, you are obligated to do 50% minimum of the amount of effort to perform on that contract. You can subcontract to others, but only up to 50%. So you have to, keep that in mind. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll encourage HUBZones to work together, because then they could take care of 100% of the contract award, and it makes it better for the contracting officers because they get to count more than one business working on HUBZone contracts. So there's been some challenges. The instability on geographic eligibility is very confusing, very lengthy and cumbersome. In the past, for example, the census done based on census. And so in year 2000, say, there was the census was done every 10 years, so year 2000. And it wasn't until 2000 they updated the HUBZone maps for that 2000 census. So there is some, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but they are now looking at making it easier, if you will, by updating the HUBZone map more frequently, while not waiting, until Congress, finally puts their rubber stamp on the census. Failing to meet the HUBZone goals is just finding qualified HUBZone firms who can maintain eligibility. It has been a very arduous requirement to verify eligibility, and so it lengthened the process. And so a lot of HUBZone firms said, I just can't spend that amount of time to get this certification. So we'll talk about some of the things they've done to ease the pain. In communities, some of them experience mixed results. Because the program was so fluid. For example, a HUBZone map would change, and the next thing you know, you were in a HUBZone, but now you're not. They updated the map, and so the other side of the street, on the south side of the street, it's a HUBZone, but you're not. And then there's a process now of making that effective. So those are the types of things that have been challenges and have contributed to the difficulty of meeting that 3% target, that goal for federal contracts for HUBZone businesses. So some rule changes. So the HUBZone map update is in June of 2023, and then they're going to update the maps every 5 years. They're not going to wait for the census to happen every 10 years and then go through Congress. So they're going to update it in June of next year, and then update every 5 years. They're going to amend the 35% rule. The 35% rule is for all, is 35% of your employees have to live in a HUBZone. So they're changing it to state that once an employee is qualified under a specific and uninterrupted period of time as a HUBZone resident, they will remain as a HUBZone resident even if the employee moves to a non-HUBZone area. So it makes it a little bit easier. We have a tremendous movement of employees in the environment as we come out of COVID, of people moving around, working from home, and everything else. So what they're looking at is essentially, if that employee has qualified originally, then there will be a period of time that they will keep them in the count of that 35%. In the eligibility at time of award, they're going to require a company only to be certified or recertified once per year. It used to be more frequently, depends, so they would have a contract award, then they require an update at that time. But now they're just doing it once a year. It makes it easier, and they have a streamlined process to do it. And they are adding incentives for small businesses to purchase buildings or enter a long-term lease up to 10 years in those HUBZone areas. So that would be your primary, your corporate headquarters, if you will, where you run your business. And if you set that up as a small business, then you can use that to meet your corporate requirement of being in a HUBZone. So they're incentivizing small businesses to work in those HUBZones. So applications will be processed within 60 days of a complete submission. Emphasize complete. We'll talk about other things, engaging us like PTAX earlier, and they have some processes to do kind of a two-step process. So you gather all your documents, and we can help you do that. And there's an Excel spreadsheet which you fill out together and send it in, so to make sure it's okay to actually hit that submit button. Because once you hit that submit button, now everything is dated. And if there are any questions or anything else, if you forgot to get some documents together, there's only a few days that they give you to update your application. And because of this, there's a 20% increase in applications in fiscal year 20 and 21, 10% in fiscal year 21. So it is getting better. It's faster. Used to take 120 days or more. So they're streamlining the application process. There's an online eligibility calculator tool. Although I must admit, I went to play with it and it's not quite there yet. However, it's coming up to speed. And they remove some of the unnecessary requirements. I mean, why do you have to get your notary to get documents notarized? It didn't make a lot of sense. And some of the financials that they were requiring didn't make a lot of sense either. So they removed some of those requirements. So there's less documentation now than there was before. So the early engagement. The SBA, is working with PTAX to get started with you working earlier. Make sure you have all of your application information together and get that package. Provide it a two-step process. We'll get it in there and make sure everything is good to go and get it a chance to clean it up and then hit that submit button. And then the 60-day clock starts. If you are turned down, you can reapply after 90 days. So there's various types of hub zones. There's qualified and non-metropolitan areas. There's qualified census tracts, if you will. There's Indian land, qualified base closure areas, Air Force bases, Navy bases, et cetera, that have been closed for a period of time. Those are designated as hub zones. And disaster areas. If it's a disaster area, they will be able to designate those disaster areas. God forbid the fires, the earthquake, et cetera, but they can make those hub zones as well. Now, one of the things I mentioned earlier was some of the states are now starting to get involved, and this has started in 2020. And right now, there's rural areas in Illinois where the governor has designated areas as being in a hub zone, and that rolls into the federal hub zone program. So, and then when a county or tract loses its hub zone, it can apply and redo it and extend it for more years. They would apply to have that extended. So here's the current map, pretty busy. and it's frozen until 2023. But it's always helpful to check to see if your business is one in a hub zone and your 35% of your employees are there. And this is the HUBZone map is online. You can go in, put the addresses in, and find out if you are operating as a HUBZone business. Eligibility, have to be a small business by SBA standards. That's by those NAICS codes that you are a small business when you registered in the SAM system. You have to be owned and controlled by at least 51% U.S. citizens, or a community development corporation, Indian tribe, agricultural cooperative. Principal office must be located within a designated hub zone. At least 35% of employees must reside in hub zone. Different rules apply for the tribal governments. They have some different rules for those community development corporations and agricultural cooperatives. And if you are one of those organizations attending the session, you can go to this Title 13 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 126, to look at that. Typically, I personally, and I think most of our PTAC don't specifically get involved with these, but if you are one, we certainly can help you out. So why do applications get declined? Not meaning that 35% employee hub zone residency. It's a certain process you have to go through and documentation to prove that out. Or you didn't meet the principal office requirement. Or you didn't meet either. So it's very important. It's critical to make sure you correctly count employees. So here's a few examples we can walk through. And I think there's a couple, before I go through the examples, I think there's a couple of questions out there. So the first one is, can you still apply for HUBZone if your address expires as a qualified HUBZone on June 30th, 2023? I would believe no. Would be my first impression is that once you are no longer on that map. However, if you are close to where that hub zone is redrawn, if you will, and one of the examples I love is you moved across the street. You can approach the SBA and or go through your congressman to get you redesignated because you were right there, you're right on the edge. Next question is the 10% price evaluation preference only applied to a large business? I believe so. And what I can do is get back and a more fine-tuned answer, but I believe it only applies to large businesses. So principal, we have a couple of principal office examples. So this small company has two owners and administrative support person, and they have their headquarters, but it's located in an urban area that is not a hub zone according to the map. However, they have a manufacturing site across the street from the headquarters that's located in a qualified census tract. The owners, the admin, all live in a hub zone a few miles away. There are 6 employees at the manufacturing site. One's part-time, works only 20 hours a week. Only one of 6 employees who works at the manufacturing site lives in a hub zone. So does this company meet the principal office requirement? Answer is yes. If you notice, the number of employees are all located within that hub zone. They live in their own hub zones, and most of the principal office essentially is here, the company headquarters, although it's non-hub zones across the street, but there's only 3 employees there, out of the total, so they meet the employee requirement. And this is the principal place of business, so it does meet the company headquarters. So another principal office example, this company is an IT services company. They're located in an area that is not HUBZone according to map. The two owners and the admin support person, spend most of their hours there. So across the street in a qualified census tract is a government facility where 6 engineers perform contract-specific work. All the owners and the admin all live in a HUBZone a few miles away. 6 employees at the government site. One of them is part-time, works only 20 hours every week. Only one of the 6 employees who works at the government site lives in a HUBZone. Does this company meet the principal office requirement? The answer is no. Having employees at a government site, that is not the company's primary point of business, company headquarters, and so it does not meet the requirement that the company is located in a HUBZone. You can't use the government site as a HUBZone. Let's talk about a couple of residency requirements. So again, another small IT services company. Headquarters is not HUBZone. The 2 owners and the administrative support person work there. Across the street is a government facility where 6 engineers perform contract-specific work. The owners and the admin all live in a HUBZone a few miles away. 6 employees at the government site. Only one of the 6 employees who works at the government site lives in a HUBZone. Does it meet the 35% requirement? The answer is yes, because they meet the requirement of the employees, 35% of employees living in a HUBZone. May not meet the corporate headquarters requirement, but they definitely meet the 35%. Have to meet both. So I'll give you another example. This is the principal office requirement and the 35% requirement. This company is a trainer's company. Provides training services, 1 owner and 2 employees. Everyone works from their home and everyone lives in a HUBZone. Does it meet the PO requirement? Does it meet the 35%? The answer is yes, because their primary place of business is their home, number 1, and number 2, they live in a HUBZone. Another one, so ownership and control. So we've talked about the physical location, now we need ownership and control. John is the 100% owner of the firm. Firm owns ABC LLC. John's a U.S. citizen. ABC LLC applies for HUBZone certification. Does ABC LLC meet the ownership and control requirement? The answer is no, because they are owned by the firm. If they were a standalone business as the ABC LLC, the answer would be yes. However, they are owned by another company. Let's see, we have another question in the chat here. What if you have...
Want me to ask the questions, Lenny?
Yes.
All right. What if you have a satellite office that we only use the address for mailing purposes?
So if it's just for mailing purposes, it's not your main place of, it's not your principal office. It's it has to meet the principal office criteria. A mailing address does not satisfy that.
All right, we don't have any other questions right now, so then keep rolling.
Okay. All right. So it's very important before you begin. And I have the certifysba.gov. Am I eligible up here? Just to, to go there first to see if you are eligible. So before you even begin, walk through the application guide, et cetera, to see, can you maintain that principal office requirement? Can you maintain the 30% employee? Have you gathered and get all the documentation required? And as I indicated earlier, we can, help you get through an initial screening, submit to the SBA for initial assessment. And the electronic verification date is important because once you hit that submit button, that becomes your what's known as the EVD. And so you want to make sure you've done all the other groundwork and homework before you assert, because you essentially, when you submit your application, you're asserting as of that date, all the requirements are there to go forward. Check and double check you have everything. So steps for certification, review those facts that the SBA puts out for the HUBZone. There's an application guide. Gather that, and then gather the supporting documentation. Review and ask questions. Don't hesitate to ask questions directly to the SBA. Verify the eligibility, compliance, and 35% employee HUBZone residency. Access SBA's general login system, and I'll talk about that in a couple minutes here. And update the dynamic small business search site and SAM as needed. You want those up to date. If your SAM isn't up to date and you submit the application, it's going to get rejected. So what you want to do is, what I suggest you do, if your SAM is going to expire in a couple of months, well, update it now so that it's good for a year. So it definitely will get within the 60-day review period. So then complete and you submit the online HUBZone application. And then you're going to, they may require additional supporting documentation, but they give you a very short window of time, just a few days, to get that additional documentation in. So again, don't attempt to complete the online application until you review the application guide, gather all the supporting documents. So make sure you have, because you're just going to waste your time and their time. So make sure it's all together. And again, we can help you with that and make sure you have all the information ready to go. So this is the GLS account. And this is to you, what you're going to be doing here in this system. Now, I should also mention that beta.certify, certify.sba is eventually the HUBZone will move over to that site, like with the women-owned small businesses now, but currently they're still using the general login system. And here is, you can see the list of items here that are still in the GLS system. And what you're going to do is you're going to select the your HUBZone, and you're going to select one that's in your profile. The other thing I want to mention on this page, just below that, where you can see where it says ProNet DSBS, right now in the SAM system, the connection to go over to update your dynamic small business profile is not connected, or very shaky at best. So one of the things I recommend for clients to do is set up a login in the GLS system, even if you don't apply for the HUBZone, and go to that ProNet DSBS to be able to go in there and update your profile. Put your capability statement in there, put the keywords in there, put any other certifications you have. not necessarily government certifications, but maybe you are quality, you have some quality standards, etc. Make it easy for government contracting officers and small business specialists to find you, and use that system for your own benefit to look at what other people are putting in their profiles, look to see if there's any other HUBZone businesses, etc. you'd like to work with. We encourage you to do that. So that's a little segue to help you get through that SAM registration as well. So now once you've selected that business in your profile, you get the typical warning that you agree to use it. You're going to click on the HUBZone function, and here it is, the HUBZone program. And this is the application process. You start it, you verify if you're in a HUBZone, and then you apply for that HUBZone certification. The small, you have the guide, review that, and make sure you're the size standard you meet for the small business. You find out that when you do the SAM registration. Any ownership and control information, affiliation information, and obviously financial information. And you have to complete this in a single session. That's why we encourage you to do all the homework up front, because you're going to do this in a single session. So you can't say upload half your documents in one session and then go back and then finish the application. No, you have to do it all in one session. So you want to make sure you have everything complete before you do that. So this is next step. This is identifying your business location. Is in a qualified HUBZone, census tract, is it non-metropolitan, metropolitan. So all of those will be determined following you put in the geographic location, again, of the principal office. Then ownership and control, these are the various things you're going to fill out. And then there's obviously ownership and control for corporations, LLCs, sole proprietors, etc. Financial information, you get tax information you're going to have to fill out, your balance sheet information, and it needs to be current. Don't pull up last year's balance sheet and figure you're going to just submit that information, because they may have a question and say, oh, could you provide this from your balance sheet? And if it's not dated as current, it would be rejected. And then of course, the individual employment data. There's the affiliation. Do you have a joint venture agreement? Is this franchise or licensing agreement? And do you have any more interests in other entities? And if you answer yes to any of these, you have to submit the details before you move forward. So then you can download the completed application, you go through the checklist, and then it'll tell you you have successfully submitted. So now you can cancel the application before the electronic verification, allowing them to proceed. But again, one sitting, don't think you can do it over multiple days. So electronic verification. So once you submit that application, it's not actually received as an active one until the firm's highest ranking officer completes the electronic verification step. So this person's going to say everything is true and complete and ready to go. You can review then the potential decline factors, if any, before hitting that submit button. And if you determine that it is not eligible, it may cancel the application and reapply at any time once the firm determines that it meets all the criteria. So if the application is declined, you can seek a new certification after 90 days from the date of the decline. All right. Online applications, again, cannot be saved, must be completed in one setting. System will automatically withdraw logged applications that have not been electronically verified within 10 business days. So when that firm's highest ranking officer has to do that electronic verification step, it has to be done within 10 business days or they log you out. Let's see, James, we have a couple of questions.
Yeah, let's take a look here. With so many folks working from home, how is this impacting having a principal office in a HUBZone requirement?
Okay, they are looking at this pretty carefully. This is a excellent question because it's happening a lot. So that goes back to one of the earlier comments I had, is that if this person was originally, so you're in a HUBZone with an initial HUBZone application, then it would stay, I think it's for 2 or 3 years, as still being, even though you were not working in the facility anymore, it would still have an impact. But principal offices, again, the upside is so many people, small businesses particularly, there's one person or just a few, and they work from home. So that becomes your principal office, meets that requirement. However, if you don't live in the HUBZone, it would impact you. They are taking some more time to look at this. There's no right answer at the moment.
All right, thanks. Carlos has another question here. Could you share how a company actually demonstrates the total number of employees living in a HUBZone? I was also curious about that.
Yeah, you would have to provide essentially best thing is payroll records and look at all the employees, and then the ones that are actually living in a HUBZone, you go to the HUBZone Map and demonstrate that they actually reside in a HUBZone and have for some time. And so it's typically payroll records is what is used to demonstrate that you have at least 35% employees living in a HUBZone. Hope that answers your question.
So generating some sort of payroll record that shows their address?
Right.
Okay. All right, that's pretty clear. Thanks for the good questions, Carlos.
Okay, common mistakes. Your SAM or your dynamic small business search is not updated. Again, I make a recommendation that before you submit any for any of these small business certifications is do an update of your SAM, your DSBS, just get it done, and it's good for a year, and then you're not going to have to worry about it during the process of getting your certifications. So the application times out. You have to, each page must be completed within an hour. Otherwise it times you out and you better restart that particular page. So have your information together, ready to go. You're unable to access the general login system. Set up that and go in there, use it to get you dynamic small business search profile before, so that you can easily log into the system. So 35% are not located within the HUBZone area. You thought they were, but once you dug in and look at payroll records and everything else, you find that that is not the case. Then that's a mistake on your part, and you would stop this, obviously trying to apply for a HUBZone status. Supporting documents, they weren't ready or inconsistent information. or they do not validate the information in the application. Review the supporting documents. Just don't assume that it takes care of what the question is, and keep everything with a certain time frame. Otherwise, you're going to move outside of that timeline, and then the information becomes inconsistent and hard for them to review. And lastly, go to the HUBZone website, spend some time getting to understand it. And again, we're here to help you get through those. Do an initial assessment, make sure that everything is ready to go before you hit that submit button. Yeah, this is the first one here is the data verification. It's got to be current documentation. Can't be something from last year. Don't use last year payroll records. Use the ones you didn't respond to email requests. Check your spam folder for SBA emails. I would just do that check occasionally if that has happened. Not understanding affiliation. Again, affiliation has to do with your HUBZone status and your affiliation with other businesses. So consult with us or reach out to the HUBZone office with your questions to make sure you meet that rule. So you're certified. Now you have to maintain it. So you have to let them know of any material change. Could be a change in the ownership, business structure, went from an LLC to a corp. You change your principal office. You change the 35% HUBZone residency status. And you must have continued to attempt to maintain it. You might have changed and you dropped to 30. But as long as you're attempting to maintain it and you show them that, you should be okay. And they're going to recertify your HUBZone status once per year. You go in there and provide any updated information and answer some questions and then hit and resubmit. Make sure you made the maintenance of that HUBZone certification, put it into your business plan. Don't wait until 5 days before the recert is due. Throughout the year, you should be checking things. You've had turnover of your employees. Check to see whether or not you're still in that 35% range. And so once you're certified, you can go to sam.gov, USA Spending, fbds.gov, acquisition.gov. And we also have the bid match system where you can so you get notifications, but you can go into like sam.gov and you can search for just HUBZone opportunities. You can do that in USA Spending and FBDS as well. And if you need additional assistance, we have some internal tools we use to help our clients focus in and find those opportunities. So to submit an offer on a HUBZone contract, you have to certify to the contracting officer that your business appears on the Dynamic Small Business Search site. And there's a note here at the time of offer via the DSBS site, that's when the contracting officer will verify eligibility. They'll do it at the time of offer, not the time of contract award. Has to be a small business under the particular NAICS code assigned to that procurement. It will attempt to maintain at least having 35% of its employees reside in the HUBZone, and it will comply with the limitations on subcontracting during the performance of the contract. And that has to do with the having to do with the 50% requirement of you performing that part of the contract. All right, so let's turn it back. We have one more question, I think, at the end here, James.
Yeah, so before we go to the last question, I want to go over some of the upcoming events, but I also just launched a poll just asking, after this presentation, do you feel more confident about going for the HUBZone certification? Yes, mostly, not really, or quite a bit, but I'll reach out, not quite, but I'll reach out to my PTAC counselor, which we hope that you do if you have further questions. If you're not already signed up for PTAC, then please sign up either for us or for one of our partner programs across the country. The following Thursday, a week from today, we're having a webinar on how to get started with local government contracting. We're partnering with the Housing Authority of the City of Alameda. It's on Thursday, July 7th, 10 a.m. That's going to be a treat. Then I'm presenting how to do business with the government. That's one of our introduction webinars for how to get into GovCon. It's our one-on-one webinar, and part of a series that we've been doing. That's on July 14th. These are all Thursday at 10 a.m., as you can tell. We hope that works for you. Navigating the Woman-Owned Small Business Certification. This one is on July 28th, and that'll be all about how to submit and the benefits of doing your WOSB application, which is another SBA certification, so the feds. So we hope you take a look at these. We're always updating our website, so take a look, norcalptech.org/calendar for future events. Let's take a look at this poll here. I can't, will you advance the slide there? Anyone get a chance? Looks like 46% of you are feeling more confident after watching this. 36% mostly. A couple of you say not quite, but you'll reach out to your PTAC counselor, and then one person is just not feeling it. So we're hoping that that could be a good thing if you're turned away from a process that you deem that is too burdensome to go through. That's also good intel either way. All right, let's take a look here. Anonymous attendees asking, we have a certified HUBZone company for 2 years plus. We've gotten little work out of it. We've reached out to federal prime contractors, but with little luck. I know you went a bit, Lenny, into where to go to find contracts, but do you have any extra advice for someone who's been struggling for a couple of years with this?
Yeah, what I would do is, well, there's a variety of things to do. One is partner with other HUBZone businesses. There's also an SBA site, it's called Subnet. And I can look it up. We can put it up on the thing here, where you can actually go in and look for those prime contractors looking for by NAICS code or HUBZone. The other thing, maybe if you're not going directly to the agent themselves, or because I heard the mention of going to prime contractors. I would go to the federal agencies themselves, the small business specialists, and with a statement of qualifications, introducing your company. And if you sign up to work with us, we can help you identify for your business what companies, what agencies are more likely to look at you, buy your product, etc. We can look and see what kinds of HUBZone procurements they've done in the past. And given that information, you now have the ammunition, if you will, to go and approach these agencies with what you have to offer. Definitely going to have to market it, and again, contact the SBA and let them know your difficulty you're having as well.
All right, great, good answer. Thanks, Lenny. Nice to wrap it up with some tips. All right, I don't see any other questions, and we are right a little bit past the hour. So thanks for everyone for joining. You should be redirected towards a survey when we leave. Please just take a moment and fill that out. You can do it anonymously. We love finding out what you thought of our webinars to gauge it, and our funder likes it as well too. So that does matter a lot to us. So thanks so much, and we hope to see you at future webinars. And remember, everyone's going to be getting the slides and the video later today. So thanks, Lenny, and thanks our audience.
Happy 4th.
Happy 4th. Bye-bye.